How's it going, everyone? It's Hacks. I'm making this video to follow up on the permanent ban appeal video that I released just yesterday. This video did draw some criticisms. In particular, there was a really good tweet by Radar, which I think highlighted all of the aspects of the video that were problematic. I think I could have clarified a couple of things better, and overall I could have avoided leaving a bad taste in people's mouth in some of these areas had I touched on some of these subjects that he mentions in this tweet. So the biggest subject that I want to touch on within Radar's tweet is the bullet point which reads that Hacks still believes in his arguments from 2021. This wasn't really addressed at all in yesterday's video. Yesterday's video, if you watched it, mostly had to do with complaints surrounding the judicial proceedings surrounding my ban, like in terms of how the due process and things like that were handled. But I never really touched on the actual subject matter which the ban revolved around. So I want to give my thoughts on that some more today, because I think that's ultimately the most important thing to touch on. So, as you saw, Radar criticized me for allegedly still believing in the whole thing that I put together in 2021. This is not true. In 2021, the first thing I'd like to clarify is that I was younger. I was 26 years old, which, in my mind, I think the age of 26 is still, at least in my case, an age of immaturity. And as you all may remember, the first video which got me banned took a very theatrical approach. Evidence.zip 2, it was almost like a feature film rather than an actual coherent argument. And so just the whole approach in itself was a joke, and that aspect I regret, because let's say, for example, there are valid allegations made within that type of a video, they're going to get thrown out because of how bad the video is as a package. So I think that happened to a strong extent. But what I will do from here is I'll basically recap what the key allegations that I actually made were, and I'll tell you which ones I still think are true and which ones I disavowed since then. So the ones that I still think are true, the ones that I know for a fact are true, are that players such as myself and Hungrybox endured harassment behind the scenes. Now, this has not happened in recent years, but this had happened in the months and years leading up to my decision to release that video a couple of years ago. So this is something very important that I want to establish that I think a lot of people overlook, is that when I made that video, I actually made it from the perspective of the victim. The reason that I felt justified in creating that video was because I viewed myself as a harassment victim. I think that's something the conduct panel and I may not be seeing eye to eye on, because in all of the ban statements that have been written about me, it's alleged that I acted with malicious intent. I did not act with malicious intent, I swear on my life. I was actually somebody trying to report instances of harassment. However, I look back at it and I obviously think that the whole thing went overboard and just flopped as a whole. Those two allegations that I just mentioned, though, the ones about me and Hungrybox, are definitely true. I can provide receipts, not that I want to, but I'm just establishing that those are the ones that I think are true. Then there was an allegation that I highly regret ever publicly raising, and it had to do with a player who was removed from the community during the 2020 Me Too movement. There are a lot of reasons that I regret raising this allegation. For one, it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths to touch this subject, because one thing I never denied about this player was that he engaged in misconduct with a minor, and therefore his removal from the community was entirely warranted. That was something I never denied throughout my videos. So just based on that alone, I regret touching the subject, because it's bad to affiliate yourself with people like that. And what really woke me up to that fact, believe it or not, was the recent news about Dr. Disrespect that came out a month or two ago, because that news shocked the whole esports world. And when it happened, I thought to myself, I was like, you know, Aziz, a couple years ago when you made those videos, you were constantly discussing a player who had engaged in misconduct with a minor, which is just in very bad taste. So I regret it just based on that alone. Then there's also the fact that the allegation that I raised about what happened to that player was unsubstantiated. I did not have concrete proof at all, not to the same extent that I had concrete proof that people like me and Hungrybox were harassed. So there's a lot of reasons why I look back at that in tremendous regret. Now, the other aspect of raising this allegation that I regret is that it caused me to become affiliated with dramatubers who are highly problematic among the Smash community. At the time, I didn't know that these dramatubers were as taboo as they are, but in the years that have passed, I've obviously learned my lesson in that regard, as I've seen the consequences that their harassment has had on people. Perfect example is how today there's this huge free hacks movement. I'd like to clarify that I actually don't have anything to do with that. While I do appreciate the support, I can't stand for the fact that people have been harassed as a result of this movement, which has emanated from dramatubers who, quite frankly, I don't really think care that much about the people who they are striving to support. I think the primary motivation here is just to stir the pot and create controversy, which is really unfortunate. So I happen to know that one of my local TOs here in New York endured harassment as a result of this movement that's going on right now. I'd like to extend an apology, even though I have nothing to do with it. As I've said, I fully accept that I indirectly became affiliated, and so I would like to extend an apology to that TO. There's another TO on the West Coast. Again, I'm trying to respect people's privacy by not naming any names, who I happen to know endured harassment as well. I'd like to apologize to them as well for any harassment that the free hacks movement may have caused them. I'm trying to resolve things in a more professional manner. I showed yesterday that I really tried to resolve this whole thing privately. In general, I'm trying to keep this professional and respectful. So, once again, I'm sorry for the fact that I became affiliated with those types of people and that I ever second-guessed that my loyalty needed to remain with the primary community. I'm sorry for that. Moving on to Radar's next criticism, he mentions that in yesterday's video, I didn't take accountability to the full extent that he would have wanted to see. I'll admit that this is true. For those who remember yesterday's video, it mostly focused on issues with the judicial proceedings surrounding my first ban. And by all means, there were issues. But at the same time, there's no excuse for the mistakes that I went on to make. I had to know well enough that ripping the subject matter open once again and repeating my offense was going to create problems. The only thing that I can say to defend myself is that I'm not a repeat offender in the traditional sense. A repeat offender in the traditional sense would be if my ban fully concluded and then I decided to repeat the offense for no reason. As I explained yesterday, that's not what happened. I was still trapped in the first ban, to be exact. I was trapped in the indefinite limbo phase of the ban, and I wanted to figure out what would get it to conclude. That was what led to me making the horrible decision to repeat my offense. So I don't view it as a true repeat offense, but it's still a partial repeat offense. I'm just trying to establish that it's not a true repeat offense because I think that that's what should protect me from being permanently banned in this situation. I know that I'm a valuable asset to this community who still has a lot to offer, and I think it would be a travesty if the story ended here because, as I said yesterday, the trajectory of my life kind of gets decided here. If I'm allowed to remain in the community, then I'll be with the community for the rest of my life. So it could affect the next 50 years, legitimately, the way that this gets ruled. So I want to establish that. But I do agree with Radar that yesterday I should have taken more accountability. I should have accepted the fact that I repeated my offense, and that's not an okay thing to do no matter what. So I just want to assure people that that won't happen again, because something I emphasized yesterday was the desire for one final probationary period. If I'm given one final probation, I know what to do and what not to do. And one thing that I will not do is repeat my offense in any capacity. Finally, that brings me to Radar's last criticism, which has to do with my behind-the-scenes behavior over the course of the past 6 months. I do need to apologize for this, not only to the TOs, but also to a lot of my friends and acquaintances. I think word has kind of spread at this point that I've been a nuisance behind the scenes, and I just want people to know that that's because I truly have been at rock bottom. I'm sorry that this happened. It happened because I've been at rock bottom. I threw my career out in January, and it has led to desperate behavior behind the scenes, which has involved spamming people, randomly inquiring with people, asking them to help me get out of this terrible situation that I'm in, etc. And I'm sorry that this hasn't exactly been appropriate. I'm trying to find better ways to cope with these circumstances, but I would say in around March, April, and May, it got really bad. I owe everyone an apology for the fact that I was behaving that way. I think now I'm handling things a bit better, but I really wasn't being considerate of other people's feelings. Someone who I have to extend a personal apology to, about someone who deserves the biggest apology I think out of anyone, is Dark Gen X. Because Dark Gen X, he was one of my best friends when I was still in the community, and that's why he went above and beyond to help me. He really went above and beyond to help me when I was at my lowest point, and I feel bad about the way that I weighed him down. He dedicated many, many hours to trying to cheer me up and help me feel better about the situation, and I think I really weighed him down. So I can understand why he cut ties with me. I hope that some of the friends that I've cut ties with slowly start to rebuild a connection with me, because I miss them a lot. But I felt that I needed to extend a personal apology to him, because he really went above and beyond. Conclusively, I do stand by what I said yesterday, in that I hope that the length of my ban sentence can be reevaluated. I think I've said just about everything that I can say now about the situation, and I appreciate Radar's criticisms, because I do think that helped me identify the holes in my video from yesterday, as there were definitely still a couple of subjects that I had to touch on. Aside from that, I just want to emphasize that I'm not a threat to anyone, and I know deep down that the pros of helping me reintegrate one last time for a final probation would greatly outweigh the cons. I really don't want things to end on this note, and as emphasized earlier, I will not repeat my offense in any capacity. I'm ready to accept that I hurt the scene, that I shouldn't defend what I did, and that I should move on to better things. So I hope that this resonates with the TOs, the people who I harassed behind the scenes. Again, I owe them an apology, and I hope that we can build a better future. I hope that things don't end on this note, because it really felt to me like a lot of the fruits of my labor, like the development of the box, were supposed to pay off right around now. And that's why this ban is so tragic. Because, like I said yesterday, if I wasn't banned, you'd see me at nightclub every single Wednesday, as well as whatever regional or national is happening on the weekend. And I think I would boost the game's viewership legitimately. I'd be one of the most active players, but that's something we'll never get to see if this ban sticks. So, from here on out, I think I've said what I needed to say. I'll probably try to discuss things in private with people from here on out. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch these videos in which I express my thoughts, and I hope that I get to see you all again someday. So, I'll continue to work on myself, and until then, thank you for your time. Once again, I'd like to provide a recap of today's video. This video was intended to follow up on yesterday's ban appeal by addressing certain criticisms and subjects which were missing. The criticism that I still believe in everything I stated in 2021 is untrue. I believe that Hungrybox and I endured harassment, which is why I felt justified in making those videos. Past that point, I'm willing to admit fault. The theatrical approach the 2021 videos took was regrettable and the byproduct of immaturity. The decision to mention a certain player who was removed from the community during the 2020 Me Too movement was in bad taste. I apologize for this. I confess that I raised certain unsubstantiated allegations, which I apologize for as well. I regret the fact that I became affiliated with DramaTubers. I was not aware of the degree to which this is considered taboo. I apologize to anyone who has received harassment as a result of the Free Hacks movement. I genuinely did try to resolve this situation privately with TOs for the longest time, until the lack of due process led to me making the terrible decision to publicly relitigate the case. I maintain that I'm not a true repeat offender, as I only revisited the original subject matter because I didn't know how else to complete the indefinite portion of my ban. This was still a lapse in judgment nonetheless, and I have to take accountability for it. I'm sorry to the TOs for placing so much of the blame on them in yesterday's video, as this was mostly my fault. I'd like to reemphasize that one final probationary period should be considered, as I plan to be of benefit to the community for decades to come. I'm also not a threat to anyone, and I promise to never do anything which should constitute repeating my offense. I apologize to those who I've harassed behind the scenes over the course of the past 6 months. This has been the result of the abrupt loss of my career. And finally, I hope that things don't end on this note, as I'd like to redeem myself as a role model for box players who attends events frequently and contributes in other ways.